Why do we love protagonists who are absolutely monstrous, both in their capacity for violence and the choices they actively make? What the heck do Thanos, Geralt, and Eren Jaegar have in common? And why do they fit the aforementioned narrative perfectly? Also, if they're so monstrous, why are we, the audience, completely enthralled by them? The three causes for this effect aren't really detached from one another in any meaningful way. Each of the criteria is an inevitable consequence of the other two. To untangle this mess, we'll showcase them by using the examples of the characters who embody this trope. Here goes. The first thing we need to establish is that what we're drawn to isn't straight up villains. You won't see Voldemort in this list, or Sauron, though Darth Vader might just weasel his way in. So what's the criteria by which we sort characters in and out of this exclusive group? In simple terms, we like heroes who do monstrous things for a good reason. We like them when they're right. Let's start by dissecting how Thanos fits into this narrative, because Big Angry Grape Dude is the most cookie-cutter example of this trope. Seriously, the fact that we have such applause to offer Thanos of all characters is proof of how barren the media we consume is of well-written heroic villains. For those of you who either don't keep up with Marvel movies or simply forgot, Thanos' shtick is that he wants to destroy half of all life in the universe. He's not doing this for shits and giggles though. He personally watched as overpopulation pushed his world into poverty, starvation, and eventually destruction, then sought to spare others from the same fate. We can all acknowledge that wanting to protect others from pain and suffering is a noble cause. But his methods, offing literally half the population of the whole freaking universe? Not a very nice move, my dude. But the audience adored him, because that contrast between his noble character and the absolutely wretched means by which he achieves his ambition made him complex and novel and interesting. The reason why I'm calling it a cookie-cutter example, despite the great response to the character, is because his motivations make no sense. To achieve his goal of ultra-foring half the universe, Thanos gathers the Infinity Stones, making himself not quite omnipotent, but as close to it as one could get within the bounds of the universe he exists in. Why the heck does he not pursue a better solution? You could argue that making more resources wouldn't solve the problem in the long term, but neither will offing half the population. With this much power at his literal fingertips, there had to have been a better solution for Thanos to go for. But he didn't, which you can probably tell pisses me off. In the comics at least, he has a much more concrete motivation for picking this particular route. Thanos is half in love, half obsessed with the literal personification of death, and frames his actions as a courting gift because, you know, roses are passé, I guess. Despite my frustrations at how shallowly he is portrayed, Thanos tickled that part of our brain that likes noble villains and monstrous heroes just enough for us to like him, go figure. Thanos best showcases the first reason why we like these characters so much. By being torn between good intentions and evil actions, they immediately become three-dimensional, and thus can charm us with their bizarre villainous charisma with ease. The fact that some people argue that Thanos' strategy is totally fine attests to it. Basically, these characters are interesting. They feel very real and, as much as villains can be, incredibly relatable. They're the heroes of their own stories and aren't evil for the sake of evil or due to a personal failing of theirs. They're evil because that's what it takes for them to be good. In the very first episode of the Netflix adaptation of The Witcher, Geralt is asked to kill a woman, Renfri, who slaughters innocents in an attempt to lure out the man who made her life hell. In response, he drops this infamous quote:
"If I have to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer not to choose at all."
You know what Geralt does immediately after? He chooses. Because standing by and doing nothing when you have the power to prevent a calamity isn't quite as evil as knowingly causing said calamity, but it's still pretty freaking bad. So Geralt chooses the lesser evil because he doesn't have the privilege of not choosing at all. How does Batman's no-killing rule stand up to this? A lot of people are frustrated with the fact that he stubbornly refuses to kill his opponents, leaving them with an opportunity to keep hurting others. This is a great example of what happens when you elect not to choose at all. There are consequences and they suck because if you don't make that choice, the universe will make it for you. I'm not arguing against Batman's no-killing rule. I actually strongly support it, which is something I might have to explore another time. But when it comes down to it, Geralt makes the choice that Batman keeps ignoring, and we respect that. His actions were evil, but his intentions were good, and he actively hated being put in that position. This is actually a theme with Geralt's character. He's really insistent on portraying himself as the monster, but we, the audience, know that there's so much more to him than that. We've now witnessed the second criteria of Monstrous protagonists: being able to make the choices that you or I would really rather not face. There's something really cathartic about watching someone else confront an impossible situation from the comfort of our own homes, away from such depravities. It feels incredible to follow Geralt as he chooses the lesser evil and kills Renfri, despite not wanting to, and adamantly saying as much in this wonderful speech. It's cool, and the rule of cool trumps all in fiction. Which brings us to the most drastic and hard-to-stomach example of this trope: Eren Jaegar, who took upon himself the burden of destroying the world to save his people. How could we ever feel deep empathy for a character who sacrifices the many for the good of the few? Aren't heroes supposed to do the exact opposite, sacrifice themselves to save the world? Eren does in fact sacrifice himself to save his people, but he also sacrifices 80% of the world's population, most of which is innocent. And while his actions are anything but heroic, we, the audience, can easily relate to the desire to protect those we claim as ours. We can respect Eren's choice even if we don't agree with it, and we can acknowledge his pain as he lives with the decision he's made. So the third criteria of Monstrous protagonists is, horribly enough, relatability. Heroes who are paragons of justice are great, but these guys are messed up little rat bastards just like us. We don't actively want to poof half the universe, but some of us would agree that overpopulation is an issue and acknowledge Thanos' desire to solve it. We don't want to kill a young woman who was thrown into a path of villainy because she was never given another choice, but we can relate to the need to contain people who are a danger for themselves and for others. We definitely don't plan on wiping out all people but ours, but we understand that when an enemy won't stop until you're dead, sometimes there's no way out but killing them instead. I'm not justifying these characters, mind you, but you can see how even little old me can find something to empathize with in each of their stories. A villain who is bad because they desperately crave power and influence and will stop at nothing to acquire it just doesn't hold the same sway, To sum it up, we like Monstrous protagonists because 1. They're three-dimensional and complex by default, making them interesting. 2. Watching them make absolutely heartbreaking choices for the greater good is extremely cathartic. And 3. They're relatable in their own way, which villains in most forms of media usually aren't. Also, these characters often invoke the rule of cool, which gets an honorable mention in this list but doesn't quite qualify, because the rule of cool is sort of a joker in the context of why we like certain tropes. If it's cool, we will like it. It's on the list by default. That's it for my analysis of this trope. I struggled really hard when picking which characters to analyze. So if you'd like me to go over your favorites in the same way, comment them down below. I upload shorts about various tropes or characters almost daily, so definitely subscribe if you're down to watch those too. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!